I don't know what's more confusing, learning astrology or just being a human. Moonday Musings is here to help with that. A weekly, no bullshit guide for the upcoming cosmic forecast and how you can actually use this in your real life. Well, hello, neighbor. Happy Monday, my friend. Happy Moonday, and welcome back to another episode of Moonday Musings. If you've never been here before, hi. I'm so glad that you found our magical little neighborhood here. I'm Danny. I'm that witch next door, and I'll be your host, your guide, your mentor, your spiritual bestie in all things modern witchcraft and cosmic living, and that is what Moonday Musings is all about. We have a very interesting little week here. We went through last week on our first Monday or Moonday of the month. We went through the cosmic energy overview for the month of September. And if you haven't gotten a chance to listen to that yet, make sure that you go back and do that. It's super, super helpful. And I have a free journal guide that will help you get the most out of that episode. Ultimately, how to get kind of the most out of looking at the cosmic energy ahead for this month. But make sure that if you haven't already, you subscribe so that you catch Moonday Musings every week, because these episodes really do connect and roll into one another so that you are living and accessing the astrology in the present, in a present frame of mind, even though we're doing some looking ahead, even though we're doing some reflection back. This is really a mindfulness practice about being really present with this spiritual tool that astrology is. And this week, in our cosmic energy overview of September, here on Moonday Musings, we look at the major astrology highlights in the major lunations, the new and the full moon each month. We look at the planetary stations for the month, when a planet is stationing retrograde or stationing direct. We also look at planetary ingresses, when a planet is moving from one sign into the next. Now, the planets are always making different interactions and activations with each other. These are called planetary aspects. Sometimes we go over planetary aspects here on Moonday Musings. But for the most part, I read them as I prepare for the episode. And then I kind of take all that information and simplify it for us here so that we can focus on the main astrology highlights, honestly, from an educational point of view, so that you feel like you're not getting too overwhelmed, but you're still learning something here on the podcast without us getting too complex in our concepts. That's what That Witch School is for. I teach astrology very, very in-depth in my monthly membership, which is an excellent place to learn about planetary aspects from me. But for this week, for our intents and purposes in Moonday Musings, we don't have any major lunations, planetary stations, or planetary ingresses this week. So what we are looking at is our lunar check-in this week. And boy, oh boy, do we have a lunar check-in. You know, as I was preparing for this episode, I was like, how interesting that it just happens that way. Especially, again, if you go through the dates that I went through in last week's episode for the month, it's true. None of my major dates fall within this week of September at all. And I think that we are still feeling pretty stacked planetary-wise, especially when it comes to the moon and what the moon has been up to and will be up to this week. So first and foremost, we just came out of a total lunar full moon eclipse in Pisces yesterday. The eclipse portal closes today, so there's lots of eclipsiness today, Monday, September 8th. Okay, keep that in mind. Today, the moon will move into Aries at 2:37 p.m. Eastern time. This kind of begins the close of our eclipse portal, and we start to come out and emerge out of that energy. But remember that we are in active eclipse season right now. This eclipse we just had yesterday is the first of the 2 eclipses we'll have this season. The second being toward the end of this month, the very last day of Virgo season. We will have a partial solar new moon eclipse in Virgo on September 21st. So there is this emerging and exiting the eclipse portal energy, and also like we're still there, kind of vibe about it as well. So we already have post-eclipse feels, experiences, and just overall mood right now at the start of this week. And then we move into our last quarter moon in Gemini at the very end of this week on Sunday. So early Sunday morning Eastern time is our last quarter moon in Gemini. And this is when the moon is forming what we call a square aspect to the sun. So during this full moon eclipse, the sun and the moon were opposite one another from an Earth perspective, how we read on our astrology chart. And then they move from 180 degrees opposite one another to 90 degrees apart, which forms this square aspect. This square aspect is why the moon is illuminated at half face, and is why we have 2 quarter moons every lunar cycle. The sun and the moon form this square aspect with each other twice every single lunar cycle. And this is a time of kind of taking inventory, starting to look around a little bit, especially in the realm of like this past month, right? This past lunar cycle. And kind of looking around a little bit and going, okay, where are we? Where have we been? What day is it? What's happened so far? How have I felt about that? How do I feel that I felt that way about it? The moon really, really beckons us deep into the layers of our emotional experience, right? And so last quarter moon is kind of this looking around and taking stock of what this last lunar cycle has so far looked like for you. It might feel helpful to listen to or just reflect back on the time of the beginning of this lunar cycle at our last new moon in Virgo, which was toward the end of August. That was August 23rd, to be exact. So you can also look back just a couple of weeks to where you were, what was going on in your life at the beginning of this lunar cycle. And where has that led? Where has that taken you? What's happened since then now that you're halfway through it? We just passed that peak halfway point that the full moon marks in each lunar cycle. Now we are approaching last quarter. What's been going on? Take that stock, take that inventory. This is opportunity to take the collection of that data, that inventory check, and take it with us into the dark moon, right? Take this with you to the dark moon goddess as you enter into the last eclipse of this eclipse season, into this second of 2 new moons in Virgo, this second one being an eclipse. So I, especially because Virgo energy is this practical, pragmatic, logical, cerebral, earth sign, right? Powered by air, right? Ruled by Mercury, but is in and of itself of earth energy, which we're going to be talking about this week in our next episode of Elemental Magic. Perfectly timed, right? So this very real here in the now sign, Virgo's zodiacal motto literally is I analyze. This is a fantastic moon for taking inventory. Don't try your best not to let it totally fucking sweep you away into the weeds. It would be really and will be really easy to do that this last quarter moon. This quarter moon is happening. It's forming that square aspect, that kind of tense conversation. That's what a square aspect is. It's a tense conversation, a challenging conversation, potentially a conflicting conversation between two planets. In this particular case, the moon, who will be in Gemini, forming this square aspect with its planetary sibling of the sun in Virgo, because Mercury rules both Gemini and Virgo, and they form this square aspect with one another, which is just so symbolic in so many ways. They're ruled by the same planetary parent, and they form this square, this tense or conflicting conversation with each other that promotes growth, by the way. That's what the purpose, the divine purpose of a square aspect is. That's the purpose of this last quarter moon, this square between the sun and the moon. And when this happens in the signs of these planetary siblings, we can draw from that metaphor, think about the conflict resolution experience that the archetype of siblings is meant to teach us. And that's very similar to the energy of this last quarter moon. So first of all, super easy to get a little bit on your high horse and a little bit turning into a know-it-all during this last quarter moon. People around you might turn into a little bit extra of a know-it-all. Where is it important to you to stand in the details, to utilize the details to stand your ground at all costs? And where is it okay to let some fucking bygones be bygones and let some of the details wash away and choose not to waste your energy there? That's the purpose of the last quarter, this taking inventory. What's worth it and what's not worth it? And because Virgo and Gemini are very meticulous, detail-based signs, this can be like some petty ass bickering arguments that roll into what? Why are we arguing about this all of a sudden? Parents, I'm giving you a heads up out there. Not even just parents. Anybody that works with teenagers, first of all. Anybody that works with children. Anybody that's a manager that has to manage teams of people and relationships and how people work together and stuff like that. Yeah. This can be a time of very silly, unnecessary argument. And you need to be as mindful as you can about where you delegate your energy, which details are worth your time, which details are worth letting, dare I say it, fall by the wayside. And Virgo does not love that. When the sun is in Virgo, when we're in Virgo season, we don't naturally want to let things fall by the wayside. We want to cover every last nook and cranny. We want to leave no stone unturned. And then when the moon goes into Gemini during Virgo season, it ramps that up in a lot of ways. It really turns up our mental capacities even more and brings us even more into our curiosity, but also our knowledge. This is where a lot of that that know-it-allness can kind of come from. And don't be afraid. Seriously, I think that this is going to serve at least somebody who listens to this episode very, very well. And if it does, if that's you and this ends up serving you well, share this episode with somebody that you think it would also help. I want you to say to yourself, I'm going to let this one slide. I'm going to let them think they know it all. I'm going to let them think they've got this one, and I'm going to go ahead and just let this one pass. I think that's going to serve at least somebody really, really well, honestly, this month. This month, actually. I meant to say this week, but maybe this month is actually more correct. Don't be afraid to take that into your month ahead. All right, my friends. We have quite the tarot reading. I am excited to walk everyone through. But before we enter into a nice grounded space with each other, I do want to take a brief moment to thank today's episode sponsor, which is, of course, Podzilla Productions. Podzilla Productions is my husband Jared's production podcast editing company. Jared has been editing, producing, working with, mixing audio for well over 17 years now, and I can personally attest to a high standard level of perfectionism that he has at this point in his career. He believes so strongly in bringing top quality professional editing services to those beginner, intermediate podcast hosts that are committed to their show and what they're doing, but maybe aren't necessarily making as much just yet from their show as much as some of the other big podcast names out there. The beautiful part about working with Jared and Podzilla Productions is that you get to take all of the guesswork out of it and hand that to somebody who understands it better, is experienced, knowledgeable, and honestly, way faster at it than you even need to be. Stop wasting hours of your valuable time as a podcast host and content creator, trying to DIY and learn those editing problems that come up when you edit with a guest who recorded in this weird way, but you also didn't really know how to advise them to record, whether it is needing help with editing, software, equipment. Podzilla Productions has your back every step of the way. You deserve an editor and producer just as personal to your podcast as your podcast is to you. You can get info, learn more, ask questions from Jared directly at podzillaproductions.com. He also has his contact information in the show notes below, but make sure that if you have any questions that you just reach out and ask. You will not regret it. This is why That Witch podcast has had such top quality professional sounding audio since the very, very beginning of my show. So again, visit podzillaproductions.com. And now let's get back to Moonday Musings, this week's reading. So before we open up to the message of our cards, I invite you, my friend, to get nice and comfortable. Reset your energy a little bit, kind of like, especially if you're watching the YouTube video, this is really helpful. Stretch your arms way out to the side and above. You can do that with your legs. You can even do that, but just with your fingers or your toes. You can do that with your eyes, your mouth, as I'm demonstrating with my face. Any part of your body you can kind of like morph and stretch so you can feel that increased blood flow and start that cleansing and refreshing and grounding process. If you have been listening to this while you're driving or you're walking and you're not necessarily sitting, that's okay too. Just pay attention to your posture right now. Feel as evenly weighted and distributed on both sides of your body at the same time, as much as you can right now. So you feel really grounded, really, really connected to the earth beneath you. If you feel called to close your eyes, maybe take some nice, deep, intentional breaths, feel free to pause this episode or this video right now and give yourself as long as you need. And whenever you're ready, I invite you to join me, to open yourself up to any insight, any guidance, any messages that you may be needing or seeking at this time. And this is so fascinating. All right. First of all, we're having this conversation about the elements and elemental magic together all throughout the month of September here on That Witch podcast. If you don't already know that, make sure you go back to last week. You've only missed one episode so far in the series, and it's just the last one. It's the fire episode, but we are going to be deep diving into each element throughout the weeks of September. And we got some fiery earth today, which is so cool because we started with fire last week, and this week we are moving into the earth element, like I mentioned earlier. So from our tarot deck, we pull none other than the Ace of Wands. All of the aces represent gifts or opportunities, things presented to us, given to us, maybe even thrust upon us from the universe. This symbolic giant hand kind of just appearing from misty gray clouds in the sky. And in the Ace of Wands, we kind of have that thrusting energy. The tarot lady, Teresa Reed, on her podcast, Tarot Bites, which I could not recommend more, by the way, when she talks about the Ace of Wands and the Ace of Swords, she talks about how the imagery is very much like, here, reach out, take it. And it's so, so true. So there is this interesting opportunity in the realm of fire. I wouldn't even be surprised if going back to the basics or getting into some really good, solid fundamentals like elemental magic is a very opportunistic direction to take right now. I have found that it is in most things, and I talk about this in last week's episode, actually. The elements are fucking magical and fascinating, and half the reason, if not more, that they are so effective in the way that we work with them and the way that we utilize them to help us understand our world physically and metaphysically even better is because of how universal elemental energy is. It is so palpable, so accessible to different people in different schools of thought, belief systems, cultures throughout time and history. It has connected so many different walks of life because the elementals are so, so incredibly universal. And it's not perfect. There's little different distinctions as you go from different philosophy to philosophy. But overall, there are these like undeniable collective connecting threads. When we go back to solid fundamentals, or we start there, because it depends on where you're at in your journey, of course. So for you, this might feel like a going back to some basics, or it might feel like getting started with the basics. Both are just as effective, and you'll find that if this is you just starting right now, that later on down the road, you'll come back to this eventually. The coming back to basics is just as effective as starting here. I have found that time and time again, so much inspiration, so much clarity is achieved, so many connections finally come full circle when we reframe something and just move through it through the elemental lens, honestly. And again, this was the example I used in the last episode, but whether I'm helping somebody move through a block and like studying their astrology and how to read birth charts, or I'm helping them develop their intuition and how to start reading distinct energies from one another, I have found that time and time and time again, I feel that intuitive, almost instinctual at this point, nudge to go back, to go through the elemental lens. And it is effective pretty much every single time. So I feel like whether it's from the Elemental Magic series or just working with the elements right now, in general, there is opportunity in the form of creativity, passion, drive, spark, fire, right? Our wands energy. From our oracle deck, which we are going with the Wild Unknown Animal Spirit deck today, we pulled the Earth card, Elk. Now, we're going to go into the Earth element here, obviously. But obviously, when you pull this, look at the fiery colors that were used. It's almost like the elk's antlers are ablaze, similar to this dark, eclipsey, right? Does that look like a solar eclipse? Sun in the sky. How fascinatingly connected to this week's energy. And everything we've been talking about is this already. Okay, let's see what the Wild Unknown has to say about the elk card. The elk is stable, resilient, headstrong, the father. The great elk represents the earth element in its masculine form. This means they provide an underlying support and stability amidst life's many changes. An elk personality, whether male or female, is fully established in themselves and knows their core values. They become known and respected for acting in ways that uphold those values. Sometimes the elk's ego can become inflated, but for the most part, they make damn good fathers, mothers, lovers, and friends. The world needs more elk energy. When elk energy is in balance, it looks supportive, kind, and consistent. When it's out of balance, it looks pretentious and high and mighty. To bring this energy into balance, eat and drink more consciously, aka ground. That's 100% what that advice is saying. This is so interesting when we bring in this solar eclipse imagery and this almost ablaze elk antlers with all this earth energy. This, to me, is all of the qualities that the elk card just read for us, and is someone aligned in their purpose, confident in their purpose, which is fire energy. Really being aligned and driven and fueled and motivated by purpose, all of that is very fire energy. And that brings us Ace of Wands opportunities in a lot of ways. I couldn't agree more. I love the way that the elk card rounds out the reading in the guidebook, because as you're reading through the qualities of the elk, you're kind of naturally thinking like, I can think of so many people that I wish felt this about themselves and really embodied these natural qualities they already have, because it's absolutely right. The world does need more of this energy. And I truly hope from this reading that there are those who are on the lookout now for their inherent elk energy that they have within and embodying it. That's what I see about kind of, it's almost like the universe, that the opportunity, the gift, the quest being thrust upon us by the universe, and this Ace of Wands is the gift of the elk energy. Isn't that kind of cool? I really love this reading today. I love this episode today. I love when we have lots and lots of astrology to chit chat about and talk about in all these different places and ways, just like we do the beginning of the month, like last week's Moonday. But I love when we also just have like some focused energy. All we did today was we talked about the sun and the moon. We talked about their astrological relationship today and what that looks like this week, because we talked about the eclipse that comes from the sun and the moon. We talked about this last quarter moon that comes from the sun and the moon. And so you can take these two seemingly super simple, super basic building blocks of astrology and look at how much we can get from it and utilize it to learn more about ourselves, to stay open to our experience, and to move through it, therefore, intentionally. This is why we're doing the Elemental Magic series this month. this concept in and of itself. So I hope very, very much to see you this week for Earth energy, my friend. I am enjoying this so much already, and we just have so many fun magical places that we are going together. Remember that enrollment for That Witch School is always open, and we are just blossoming as fuck over there. Let me tell you that. You can find the links in the show notes below to sign up for That Witch School, to download my free Moonday Musings guide, and also to book a personal one-on-one birth chart reading with me, or tutoring session with me, or tarot reading with me. If you have any questions about any of the above, let me know. All my info is in the show notes below. And thank you very, very much, my friend, for your time today and every day. It means the absolute world to me. Until I see you next time, make sure that you stay safe, you let yourself keep having some fun, and of course, stay magical out there. If you are a big fan of That Witch podcast and everything we do here in our witchy neighborhood, I would be so grateful if you could head over and give us a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This is something that helps boost our reach for the show, and it lets so many others know that what they're getting here at That Witch podcast is really, really good quality stuff. It only takes a couple of minutes, and it's totally free, and it makes a huge, huge difference from one witch to another. Thank you so much for your support, neighbor.